Hey everybody, we're back. Jimmy here, and I'm joined by Instructor Mike Griffin. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the training side of things, and more specifically, are you actually ready to take a shooting class? That sounds really weird coming from us because it's almost insinuating that we're going to discourage someone from taking a class. That's not the case at all. We encourage people to train as much as possible, but Mike, I think, you kind of came up with the idea for this episode, actually. I think that people have to go into a shooting class that they sign up for. They got to have the right mental state of mind going into it, the right mentality, and they also need to have the right expectations, etc., to actually get the most out of that experience. So that's kind of what we're going to talk a little bit about here.
Yeah, so I wanted to cover this over the last, probably close to 18 years. I've taken lots and lots of classes as a student. And then as an instructor, I've, seen it from the other side of things. It's interesting to see people show up for classes either as fellow students or pitfalls that I've run into over the years. And so I kind of wanted to help set people up for success coming into the class, because it makes our job as instructors and other instructors within the industry easier if students show up both they've selected the class appropriately, they have reasonable expectations coming into the course, and then they show up ready for the class, mainly, physically, logistically, etc. And then they have a plan in place to make the most out of that class afterwards, right? Because the goal of education should be that you have a good time, but you also learn something, and you make that information kind of permanent, or at least additive to your toolbox, instead of just hey, I had a great experience, because there's a difference between training and an experience. Particularly here, we categorize those as two different things. We can teach you stuff during an experience, but the main focus is to have a good time, maybe get exposed to a new concept, do something that you haven't done before, that sort of thing. But it's lower on the taking away a bunch of skills at the end of the day, versus a class where maybe it's not the first time you're exposed to something. It's not your first experience, and you're going to take away a greater level of skill and knowledge, maybe some homework, that sort of thing, either self-imposed or provided by the instructor staff. And so kind of figuring out what your plan is going into the class, setting yourself up for success so that you can get the most out of it, and then having a plan to use that information afterwards. And I see people run into issues kind of at each step of the process, where they'll sign up for a class that maybe they're not prepared for, in the sense that it's a more advanced level course, and so it's built on you having some foundational skills, and people will show up and maybe they don't have those foundational skills, and they struggle through the class, and they're having to put a lot of conscious effort into being safe with the gun, loading and unloading the gun, whereas we're trying to work on something a bit more advanced, target transitions, or even just working on presentations when you're not real comfortable with the grip on a handgun. Mm-hmm. So if you think about foundational skills, should hopefully at some point be kind of subconscious. If you have to spend a lot of conscious effort on those foundational skills, and we're working on something that's maybe a bit above that, then it's going to be real hard for you to focus on the information that we're putting out, because you're thinking so hard about just how to get the gun loaded.
Well, that's kind of one of those things then at the very, very beginning process, when you're even considering taking a class and you're looking at something online, you're thinking about signing up. I think that's where you have to differentiate what it is that you're looking for. Is this something you want to go to and learn? Is this a class? If somebody took a class, let's say they went to a local technical school and they took a class at night, they're probably going to pay a lot of attention to that. They're going to it to learn something that they can then hopefully oftentimes apply to their life, maybe professionally, or maybe it is just an interest in a hobby, but they want to pursue that further somehow. This in a lot of ways is a similar concept, just maybe it doesn't happen over the course of a semester. It might happen over the course of a day or two. But, I think people need to realize, like, for us, we have intro classes. We have we'll talk pistol round. You brought up pistol earlier. So we have our intro to pistol class, where that's really a fantastic class. It's not even a full day. It's like 4 to 5 hours. And if you looked at it on paper, it's not the barrel rolls, mag changes, Bruce, Willis, all that kind of stuff. It's not that. And so some people are like, but I want to be a total badass. I want to be doing barrel rolls. I want to be, running and gunning. But, I mean, even honestly, if you went somewhere to just, quote, have that experience, if you're using real guns and all that stuff, that's even going to be, you're going to realize pretty quick that if you don't have a lot of experience around guns and shooting, holding them, even is something as simple as that, just how to hold it is going to start to be difficult, and working it, manipulating it, and it can start to be unsafe. It can start to be actually way less fun than you anticipated it would be. And next thing you know, you're way overwhelmed, and that's not good. It's a slower build up to the doing stuff that looks super fun. It's super crazy.
And like, I fully support people getting to that point, but it's kind of like somebody saying, hey, I want to jump off the high dive, but I don't know how to swim. And I don't want to fool around, but I'm like, hey, I don't feel like spending time maybe in the shallow end or working my way up with an instructor of like how to swim. I just want to jump off the high dive.
Right. Yeah. I just want to do what that guy's doing. Why can't I just start doing
and it's
that?
like, I mean, you can do it, but the consequences are potentially real high. It also may like sour your experience for swimming forward.
Maybe you would have really enjoyed swimming, but your first time was belly flopping from 50 feet in the air.
Yeah.
And then potentially drowning.
Yeah. So it has to be kind of a steady progress. The other aspect to this is I don't want a student to show up and be frustrated because they're in over their head with a particular class or a topic. But we also don't want most of our class sizes are pretty small, and we have a lot of staff that can support students. Not every instructor has that, built into their courses. But I don't want like one student to show up and not be having a good time, but also not be kind of along with the program. Maybe they're posing a safety issue because they can't keep up with the curriculum. And I have 7 other students that are doing great, and I have to make adjustments to 1 or 7 people to balance, safety and all of that stuff. So it's not just that singular student, but the entirety of the class, right?
And realistically, it's not like math on paper where maybe, somebody is not getting it. If you need to, in the case of time, you just move on, and, but you usually have to play to the person who is potentially posing a safety issue or something like that, because you can't just brush that off in shooting.
And luckily, like here, we have lots of staff, and our instructor to student ratio is really, really good. And so when that happens, a lot of times we'll just tailor stuff to one instructor will work with that person that's maybe a little behind on skills, and we try to adjust things for them. And then we don't kind of reduce the experience of the other students. Yeah. But it's always something that we have to play with to make sure that everybody's getting the best experience, and they're getting the information and the goals that we have for the class, and we're being safe. But some of that can be alleviated by, picking and having reasonable expectations of yourself and the course that you're choosing. If I've never handled a pistol before, or maybe I have very minimal experience where I go and shoot with somebody else, and they consistently like load the magazines for me and they load the gun for me and then they just hand it to me and have me shoot, maybe I'm not ready for like pistol 3. Right.
Or even
pistol one. And so it's probably better to start in our intro pistol class, which I really like the way we structure that because it is a little bit shorter day. So you don't have like 8 hours of feeling like, man, I'm just taking in all this information. It's closer to like 4 or 5 hours. You can process that information, digest it, and then come back either for pistol 1 or a repeat at the intro if maybe you struggled with some of the things that we covered in intro. It's also, affordable, and it gives you a little taste of what our curriculum looks like. And none of it is kind of lost once you go to Pistol 1. Like Pistol 1 builds on top of Intro to Pistol. Now, that being said, like if you're, have a pretty strong grasp of shooting a pistol, you have some experience doing it, you can load the gun and unload the gun safely, that sort of thing, then, Pistol 1's probably a good spot for you. And so, like, having a honest assessment of your own capabilities and where you're at when picking classes. We see this, we try to have very few classes that have prerequisites because we don't want to have a lot of barriers to entry. But some of them do have prereqs, night vision being one of them. And I want everybody to enjoy night vision, so I don't want anybody to like miss out on that. But things get harder when it gets dark, and so if you don't have,
make it easier.
Because like we're losing part of our sensory input, even though we have night vision on. And so if you don't have a strong grasp of running a carbine during the day, it's probably not going to get better when we turn the lights off and we put other layers of systems into play, helmets, mounts, night vision, lasers, etc. And so it'll, like, some people just want to jump straight to the high dive. And I think they will, across the board, if you were to like ask them after a class, if they jump straight to the high dive, would you have maybe had a better time if you had a firmer grasp of running a carbine, before coming? For people that maybe didn't have a lot of experience with carbine, I think most people would say, yeah, I would have like been a lot more comfortable.
Right. Well, and you've brought up a couple times too, like the safety aspect of it, and we harp on that a lot because I think there are times where it's like somebody's thinking, well, I get it. You guys are saying that maybe I shouldn't do this just because, skill wise, maybe I'm not there, but I'm a quick studier, I can keep up and those sorts of things. But very few people, I find, maybe they go to a range and there's, other people on the range, but very few people shoot in the environment of a class where maybe multiple people are shooting on a line next to one another and there's not the big action target glass ballistic or steel bullet safe wall between them and the next person, and they're used to shooting in kind of a bubble. But being in that environment, even just being, I'll say, like, I can't even think of another way to say it. I don't want to say it in like whatever way, but even just being not very good at shooting, well, yeah, you guys are talking about loading a gun. That's simple. I know how to load a gun. But do you know how to load a gun only when you're by yourself and no one's around and you're out on your land or something like that and you're surrounded by hills and trees and so the gun's kind of pointing off to the side and there's no one there?
Yeah.
But now all of a sudden when there is someone there, that becomes a whole different story. Can you load the gun while keeping it pointed down range? Can you actually, shoot in such a manner where you're not accidentally shooting someone else's target or the gun isn't flipping up and, next thing you know, or whatever it is, can you actually be conscious of mind enough to not turn to somebody and sweep? These are all things that you get with more experience. So a lot of it boils down to, even if it's, maybe, I'm just not as skilled or I'm not as quick or fast or something, a lot of it does come around full circle to be a safety thing.
And so I don't need students to be like great shooters coming into class, because at that point, like, if you're a great shooter coming into class, like what are you getting from the class, right? Maybe you're getting sort of like a checkup on your skills, but how do you? It's kind of like an entry-level job that requires a lot of experience. How do you get that experience if you can't get the entry-level job? And so the thing that I need students really to be able to do is process following the 4 firearm safety rules, kind of at a subconscious level. And then the other stuff we can work on, particularly in like a pistol one, carbine one, that sort of thing. Because you're right, like I need you to be able to, maybe you know how to load the gun, but when you're by yourself or you're in that little cubicle at your local range, you're loading a gun without a really strong awareness of muzzle discipline. And so maybe I need you to be
finger discipline, because people aren't watching, you're right around you.
Yeah, and the consequences are relatively low because you're in a ballistic cubicle, right? Like you might have to pay for a pane of glass, or you may have just gotten away with breaking one of the firearm safety rules in that process before, and nobody noticed that you did that. But when we're on a class, like we're intermixed with other people, we set up systems to prevent accidents as much as possible. But it still is reliant on the students to follow those 4 firearm safety rules, which keep us out of trouble. And so if you can't do that, kind of at a subconscious level or a divided attention level, where like, hey, I'm aware of trigger discipline, I'm aware of muzzle discipline, I'm aware of the status of my gun, I'm aware of my target and what's beyond it, while also being able to take in the information that we're trying to put out about a block of instruction.
Try new things.
And perform that block of instruction, at least make an attempt at it, and allow us to give you feedback and that sort of thing. Then we're maybe a little more advanced than where you should be. Maybe you just simply need some time at that more intro level, like getting accustomed to having awareness of this thing that we're holding, the firearm. And so it only gets more difficult as we add layers, because it's like, okay, well, now I need you to follow the 4 firearm safety rules. I need you to have good solid grip. I need you to do kind of all the things that allow you to shoot straight, and I need you to do them with higher levels of difficulty, multiple shots on target transition, shooting on the move, etc. And if you don't have a good solid foundation to work from, then it's going to be really hard for you to do the things that I'm asking you to do with increasing layers of difficulty. And so I would rather you be a little underwhelmed and refine your technique on something than be like, oh man, I'm super, super stressed out and I can't focus on the thing that the instructor is trying to put out.
Right.
Because I don't even know how to like hold the gun right, and be able to manage recoil, or be able to, shoot straight when I'm trying to, put rounds down range.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember when I was, as a kid, learning to play basketball, and you learn how to like dribble a ball and all that stuff. My brother went out in the driveway and he taught me how to dribble a ball, and he started trying to teach me how to dribble it with my eyes up and stuff like that, because eventually you're going to get tossed in a game and you can't be focusing on trying to learn how to dribble a ball when there's, people trying to come at you and all that stuff. So it's the same thing, except in that case, of course, it's not a life or death situation potentially. But not to be the safety police or anything like that. Safety is obviously very important. But I feel like we've harped on that a good bit. But like, how about just from an expectations and actual preparation for a class? Mike, I know you take the approach when you've taken classes and been a student. You take the approach, I think, of really focusing in on that class. Not necessarily, what am I trying to say? Like when you take a class, it's a big deal for you. You know what I mean? Like you're taking time out of your day, out of your schedule, away from family or work. You're paying money to be there. It can be sometimes a bit of a hassle just getting there logistically. And so when you're there, you might as well really get something out of it. And I think, we've seen people either in our own classes come through, or you've been at classes before where you see other people, and it seems like they're just sort of there. They're almost just existing there. And you're kind of like, why did you go through all this just to did you actually get better? Did you get something out of it? Did you write anything down?
Yeah. So I started taking classes, and maybe it was just where I lived. I had to travel for a lot of the training that I went to. So on top of like tuition and ammo, which is already, you know, a pretty substantial investment in a lot of places, you know, I had to like either drive or fly, and then hotel. And so sometimes you would spend as much money in the travel portion as I would spend on at least tuition, if not tuition and ammo. That was back when ammo was a lot cheaper than it is now. And so it's a substantial investment before I've ever even like heard the first word out of the instructor's mouth in person, right? And so to me, like I wanted to be as prepared as possible so that I could get as much out of the class. So I would, you know, go out of my way to set myself up for success. I figured this out early on. Let's say the packing list said, hey, you need a carbine and a pistol, and you need 5 magazines per, and mag pouches, etc. I would show up with a spare rifle, a spare pistol, so that if a gun went down, I wasn't spending a bunch of time working on a gun. I was spending time going, just grab the other gun, which already, like, everything's squared away on it, right? So, like, the sight is zeroed, or sights. If I'm running backup iron sights, those are zeroed. So, like,
you've made sure that they function reliable.
The
it
gun
wasn't like your garage build that you've never shot before, and you're like, well, this is unproven. I'll take it to a class that I spent a bunch of money on.
Yeah, so like it amazes me the number of people that show up, and I get it. Like, you're excited about your latest build and you want to shoot it, but they'll show up to a class and they've never shot it before.
It's fresh.
And so not only is it not zeroed, but it's not proven to be reliable. And they show up in class and they might make it through zeroing or the first, you know, block of instruction, and then something happens. Like if it's a carbine, you know, things are getting better. I think, you know, right. Yeah, like it's undergassed or overgassed, or it doesn't like the ammo that you're shooting. And so for me, like, I take a different approach, I guess. I try to pick a rifle that's going to, you know, be easy to shoot. If it's a rifle class, I try to pick a pistol that is, like, unless I'm shooting a class that is very focused at deep concealment or working from concealment, like, I'm going to shoot a full-size pistol. It just allows me to focus more on the mechanics that I'm trying to learn than work around like a subcompact gun. Mm-hmm. And so similarly, with a carbine class, like, I'm going to shoot a gun that's very, I guess, forgiving or easy to shoot so that I can focus on the block of instruction. I'll take very good notes, and then I'm going to take that information back. And if I want to work on, you know, an SBR or something that is kind of a niche application, then I'll work on that stuff on my own so I can get the most out of the teaching point from the class, right? Mm-hmm. And that's, you know, my approach. I also try to show up with like at least 2 or 3 times as many magazines as the minimum.
Yeah.
And I'll generally load all of my magazines up the night before. If I flew in, you know, I'll have ammo shipped in. I try and get my ammo early as possible, and I have my mags loaded. You know, usually I'll leave like 1 or 2 empty in case there's some drill that requires an empty magazine or a partially loaded magazine at the beginning of the course. And I have a big stack of magazines to draw from so that I can be listening to the instructor, hydrating, prepping for the next block, addressing any issues instead of having to stuff mags, because I showed up with the minimum number of magazines.
Yeah. Do you also tend to show up with a little extra ammo?
Definitely show up with a little extra ammo. It's a balancing point when you're flying. But, you know, generally speaking, most airlines or TSA says you can fly with 11 pounds of ammo. I'll try to have ammo shipped in, and if I have to fly back with a little bit, it should be under 11 pounds.
Sure.
But I don't want to run out of ammo in a class.
Yeah.
If I think I'm getting low, I'll usually go and talk to the instructor, and I'll be like, hey, man, like, I'm low on ammo. It looks like we're shooting more than anticipated. What's the like minimum round count I need to accomplish the final drills? I'll set that aside, and then I'll shoot through trying to get as much of the blocks of instruction.
Yeah.
Really less of an issue Recently, that was kind of back in the day when, funding was a little bit harder, and I was a little more strapped for ammo funds.
Well, and ammo is an interesting one because I know sometimes people have talked to us after a class, and we put an estimated round count on our website, and you get it before you show up for a class here, and we try to pad that a little bit. I think we usually go a little over, and sometimes people are like, "The heck, man! Like you guys said we were going to shoot 300 rounds, and we didn't shoot 300. I got ammo left over." I think there's a couple things there. Is that I guess I'm always of the mindset I'd rather need and not have than have and not need. Or no, wait.
You'd rather have extra.
The other way around. So I would not rather that. Oh, gosh. I should stop saying those phrases because they're very confusing. Have and not need than need and not have. That's the one. I'd rather have that. I think that a lot of times those people, I wonder, were you just looking to blast 300 rounds? Maybe we shot 280.
Yeah.
Did you make all 280 count? Or are you here and you're like, man, I just want to just full-on mag dump, and I'm mad I didn't get to do that 300 times. There's questions like that. But then the other thing is, if you do have a little extra ammo on hand, sometimes there's a drill. I know it's happened here before where somebody runs a drill and they flub something. It happens.
Yeah.
I get it, And you go back and the instructor's like, well, I didn't take much time. You want to just run it again? And you can get that opportunity if you have a little extra on hand.
Yeah.
And so you could maybe get to run a drill here or there twice when otherwise ordinarily you wouldn't have been able to. And so it's never really a bad thing unless you have over, just like gob tons extra ammo.
Yeah.
That would be a little bit odd. But it's never really a bad thing to have a few extra boxes, a 20,
Yeah, I think if an instructor put out like, hey, this is a 1,000-round class and you shoot 300 rounds, like now I have concerns about like how closely we followed the curriculum. That's type of thing.
There's a big discrepancy there.
Versus, hey, the round count's 300 rounds, and we were within like 10%. Like I don't really consider that to be an issue, because it might be like, hey, it just took you less time to zero your gun or confirm zero, or something like that, and so. I like to have 10 to 20% extra when I go to a class. So like I recently flew out to a class and had to ship ammo ahead of time. And I think I shipped about 20% extra on pistol and carbine. And we shot pretty close to the round count. And then any opportunity, once I saw like, hey, we're getting close to the end of the class and I'm about done, if there was an opportunity to like jump back up in line, and run a drill a second time, without like screwing up the timing of the instructor, then I would jump up there and shoot a little extra and, get extra time doing, a rep on a drill. So it benefits me. I don't have to carry ammo back, et cetera. And, but also I have a little bit of padding if something changes, right? Or if I have some, equipment issue that I've got to work through or something like that. Yeah. The other thing that I try to do that I see some students struggle with, and I get it, like it's hard to get ammo, but I try to show up with like one consistent load.
Good point. Yes.
So that
especially in long range.
Yeah. So a huge thing for long range where you're trying to gather data and like every shot fired is an opportunity to gather dope, data on past engagements. And so if I show up to a class where I have like, half of my ammo is one type and half of it is another type, well, now I have like, I'm trying to like figure out my data halfway through the class. Not a big deal with carbine and pistol, especially if you're not shooting like strictly for accuracy. But my bigger thing is like, is the gun gonna function with that ammo? Yeah. Like if I have two different types of ammo, and one of them is what I've been shooting a bunch of recently, and the other ammo isn't validated in that platform, then am I going to start running into malfunctions? Right. And I don't really want to have that happen at any point during the class. I definitely don't want to have it happen as I'm getting towards the more challenging or more advanced stuff, midway or later in the class. So to me, like I try to like set aside, okay, this class is, maybe a 500 round count class. I'm going to show up with 550 to 600 rounds, and it's all going to be, one consistent type of ammo. And it's an ammo that I know my gun functions with. So before, as a part of like, hey, getting ready for the class, I'm going to go out and confirm 0 on the gun, or guns. I'm going to shoot the ammo that I'm taking to the class. I'm going to make sure that it functions correctly. And I'm going to make sure that the gun's zeroed. And now I minimize issues, during the class. Like, I can't guarantee that there won't be a mechanical problem, but at least I can say, like, hey, this is ammo I've used before, the gun's zeroed, etc.
Right. And what we really, to like sum up what we've talked about there for the last little bit is ensuring your equipment and everything you bring along with is set, because like you said, anything can happen. You can still have a potential issue, but if you can minimize it as much as possible, then you can focus more on training. And there's nothing more annoying than when you want to be shooting, you want to be training, you want to be learning, and you're fiddling around with a buffer or a gas, something, what am I trying to say, gas blocker. You're fiddling around with your slide, or how many times, believe it or not, are you remounting an optic because your optic literally fell off the gun?
Yeah, so I would say the last few classes that I've been in, both as a student and an instructor with rifles of some level, somebody has had to remount an optic. Mm-hmm. And it's like some of that is, I guess, out of their control, but there's manuals, right? If we just read the manuals, follow the instructions, they're generally going to set you up for success. Right. And then, part of that zeroing process, you should quickly find out if your optic is mounted correctly. And so, having all that stuff kind of squared away so that you don't have to worry about it in class, because the focus of class should be learning, right? It shouldn't be figuring out if your gear is installed correctly. There's a difference between figuring out,
unless the class is how to set up your gear correctly.
Yeah, and that might be there are, part of our intro to LR class is how to mount an optic. And so that is absolutely a teaching point, for that course. The thing I'll say, there's a difference between a gear shakeout and figuring out if stuff works in certain conditions, and hey, I didn't install this thing correctly. And I don't think anybody wants to would purposefully show up to a class, hey, I don't know if I installed this correctly, versus I just want to see if this scope and reticle combination or this rifle sling, whatever, is going to work well for me in these conditions. Yeah. I try to limit some of that somewhat so that I show up with gear that I'm comfortable with, so I'm not fighting gear while trying to learn. Yes. But that's an investment in time on the student's side of hey, I get it, you want to try stuff out, and some people have difficulty getting access to ranges, particularly for LR stuff. And so you have limited ability to test that stuff, but a lot can be done, at 100 yards. Yeah. So
it's true. But how about, so outside of equipment, kind of the last big one is just you yourself as the person. I think a couple of very seemingly obvious ones are, I get some of our, get a good night's sleep.
Yep.
Don't show up hungover. These are pretty obvious things, even though it happens still. Mm-hmm. Some of our intro classes will happen in the afternoon, and, maybe sometimes you can do an honest assessment. If you just had the roughest day ever and you're about to go to a class at 4 p.m. and you're going to be a zombie during it, maybe not the thing to just gut out. Yeah. Handling and firing guns for the first time ever. Maybe you call us up and you're honest and we can chat about it, and that's just, is what it is. We can figure it out another time. But show up just ready to go.
Yeah. And so the thing I like to say is show up ready, physically and mentally. So be hydrated. If you don't learn well on an empty stomach, then maybe have a little bite to eat. Maybe you do learn well on an empty stomach. Then set yourself up for success that way. It's less of a big deal for indoor classes, but but outdoor classes, like, make sure that you're staying hydrated. If it's outdoors and it's a cold weather class, like, whatever the conditions are, you need to wear clothing and bring clothing in preparation for that. So if it's really hot, then, you know, stuff that'll keep you comfortable as much as possible in those conditions. If it's cold, you know, gear for that. So, you know, weather specific clothing, and then bring like snacks and food. Like, I have absolutely showed up to classes and I expected that we would be given a break for lunch, and it was like, hey, we're going to be doing a 25-minute working lunch, and I had a couple bottles of water and like a Cliff Bar, and that was like a 14-hour class. Ooh. And by the end of class, I was miserable, and I was just like exhausted. I was ready. I was done. Like, at probably 10 hours, I was done. And so, gutted
You're not
my
really
way.
learning anything anymore.
No. And, so that night I went, and got a bunch of, range snacks and food and stuff, to show up for class the next day. And the next day was much better, but it was like, oh man, I should have, like, that was my little personal lesson of like, don't expect to be given a break for lunch where you can drive back into town and get food.
Yeah.
And come back.
We do break for lunch at Vortex Edge.
We do, yeah.
For what it's worth.
And so, have at least enough to get you through day one of like hydration and nutrition, and then show up with an open mind. So if there's an opportunity for you to do research about, like, in greater depth about the class or the instructor, I would encourage you to do it. I feel like now it's actually a little bit harder. We have more like social media content, but like when I started taking classes, forums were really common.
Yeah.
And you could go and read articles, or not articles, but like posts by people that had taken classes. And you may have even been able to find a post about somebody taking that class at that range, if it was a traveling instructor. And so you could really understand kind of the flow of things, any sort of like pitfalls about finding the range, any issues, mosquitoes, those sorts of things that you need to be prepared for. And it was a really valuable tool. And I feel like those things occur less. There's definitely not as many posts like that around. And I think if people do like YouTube videos or IG posts, maybe they're a little bit harder to navigate, but go find your instructor or the company, look at the content that they put out, see what the stuff they're tagged in, that sort of thing, and do the best you can to set yourself up for success. Show up with an open mind. So you're paying somebody to teach you something. What we try to say is, like, this is our perspective on this content. Please give it a chance throughout the class, because if you just kind of show up and keep doing the thing you've always done, then you're just going to get the result you've always gotten.
You just paid more money than you needed to for another range day.
Exactly. And so, and then however your learning style is for documenting, bring stuff to be prepared for that. So if that's a notebook and a pen, cool. If it's a phone and you just take notes on it, cool. If you can commit it all to memory, kudos to you. I can't do that. But so like I have a training book, and every time I fill it up, I just buy a new one, and I can look back at that, and it has probably the last like 4 or 5 classes that I've attended as a student, and then stuff that I have taken notes on in preparation for class, and then things that I have figured out after class, of like, hey, I practiced this drill and I figured out that I was doing such and such. Yeah. So set yourself up for that kind of like long-term retention of information. I will say, like phones are awesome, because you can have another student, or you can take like a tripod or something and film yourself performing right. within the class. That's huge. Some instructors don't want you to video in class, so check with them on that. Like, our approach is you can video whatever, but I know not everybody is the is the same with that. But it's a huge opportunity for you to be like, hey, I'm about to run this drill, and maybe somebody will film it for you. Or you can take, I know Brennan is a huge proponent of this, like at the end of the day, just do like a video talking to yourself, maybe on the car ride back to the hotel or to home, going over the things that you remember from class. And so like, you don't have to do any writing. You don't have to stop and do whatever at the end of the day. You can literally, do it while you're sitting in your car. And, obviously follow all safety laws about traffic.
Mike's also not a lawyer. It seems the biggest, what am I trying to say, theme throughout all of this is just set yourself up for success. It's from the very beginning, just picking the right class, having the right expectations, getting your gear ready, and then just making sure that you and your mind and body are ready. I mean, so that's why I was getting at the beginning. It's not us saying maybe you shouldn't take a class because maybe you're not class material, but it's more just, if you set yourself up for success, you can have so much better of an experience. And if you don't set yourself up for success and you kind of just set yourself up for failure, realistically, then in that sense, it's probably not best. And we're just saying this as like your friends here at Vortex Edge. It might just be a waste of your time and money in that case. But when you're ready, then it can be awesome.
Yeah, and I will say as well, like here, because we have the resources that we have, when a student shows up, like we go out of our way to make sure that they get the most out of class. Mm-hmm. It's not a knock on other instructors, but there's a lot of instructors that they're kind of the one-person show, right? They travel to a range and they're very reliant on a host to have a lot of stuff set up.
For the students to bring a lot of stuff.
And if a student shows up ill-prepared, either like ready to go at the level that the class is expecting, the performance level, or from a logistics standpoint, there isn't a safety net, right? Of like, hey, here's a spare gun, or hey, I'm going to cut away an instructor to get you spun up so that you can either catch back up with class or get something out of this day. Yeah. Like very, very few places have the ability to do that. And so if you think about showing up for a class that you travel to, you set up hotel reservations, hopefully you have the gear that's required, and something goes wrong, like that's a pretty big expenditure to be out because you didn't take an honest look at your preparations going into class.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. Yeah, we can bail people out a lot of times in those situations. Yeah. So it's funny because we're saying be prepared, set yourself up for success. If you take a class at Vortex Edge, we may be able to bail you out. However, it's just not an ideal situation for anybody. Yeah. You know what I mean? So again, set yourself up for success and don't.
Yeah.
So I like it. Mike, any closing comments? I feel like that last thing you said was
I think that's probably about it. Yeah, I mean.
Good deal. Well, for those who are watching or listening, remember we do. You can also watch us on YouTube. We're sitting here in our armory at the range. If you have any questions about this, any classes that we offer, or if it's experiences that our guys like Mike have had with classes in the past, hit us up. Let us know. You can hit us up on Instagram. I think actually we have an outro after we're done here that's going to say all of the exact stuff that I'm saying right now. But we appreciate everybody listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Let us know topics that you want to see, too. We're always happy to dive into those. Thanks again. Bye.
Thanks for listening.
That's a wrap, everybody. Hope you liked this topic. If you did, be sure to like, comment, and, of course, subscribe right here because there's going to be plenty more to come. If there's topics you'd like to hear us go over on the Vortex Edge podcast in the future, you can let us know by commenting below or hitting us up on Instagram, which is @Vortex Edge. We'd love to hear your suggestions so we can be bringing you the kind of episodes and topics that you want to hear. Otherwise, we'll be seeing you on a future episode. Thanks again for watching, everybody. Bye.